you mentioned, I'm the founding principal at a consulting firm called Jaunt, and I'm here to talk about something that I'm very passionate about, which is the market. And understanding the nuances of the market is ridiculously important with what we do in life sciences and medtech startups. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. So I appreciate being invited out to talk about this. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I have about 20 years in startups experience. The first half of my career largely was spent in the trenches of startups in helping these companies and new products move to market. I started in the trenches of engineering, and so I truly have an analytical mindset to how I approach problems. But I've since moved on towards, okay, how do we look at markets? How do we understand what products are going to be successful, and understanding the nuances of the market that we're going to be selling into? And I'll start with kind of the end point here. And let a secret out of the bag, which is every startup fails. Every startup that fails does so for one reason, and every startup that is successful does so for one reason. And I will argue this over and over again and say that there is one reason a company is successful and one reason a company fails, and that, largely speaking, is customers. And unless we're in the business of philanthropy and charitable organization to be able to, bring some interesting things to help humanity, at the end of the day, a startup entity and in the life sciences has to have a market. It has to have customers that are interested in the product, and has to move that product towards those customers to do any good. And it has to make money. Unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. And so understanding the nuances of how all that works is what I'm here to talk about today, and so that you can be more efficient in it. And I'll also add to this equation that, every company has to do this. Every company eventually that is successful will walk through this process. And so the idea is to understand the nuances of it as early as possible, start the process as early as possible, be as efficient as possible moving forward, and so that you can be more successful. Sometimes companies, they raise so much money that they buy themselves enough time to figure this out. And sometimes companies, they figure it out in the beginning, can raise a little bit of money and be successful that way. And so being efficient with the process is critically important. I like this quote by Stan Rowe, who's the former CSO of Edwards Life Sciences. He's since moved on to have some venture and incubation projects that he's working on right now. But he said that most projects don't fail because the technology doesn't work. They fail because we didn't understand the customer requirements, didn't understand the distribution, didn't understand the competition, didn't understand the payers and referral patterns, all these extrinsic factors. And he said, if you don't have early stage marketing integrated into your teams, then you're flying blind. I love the way he positioned that and the way he said that. It's not strictly about the technology. Largely these days isn't whether or not we can build something, it's whether or not we should build something and what we should build. And so understanding that early stage marketing, as opposed to the traditional marketing, and we'll get into that a little bit later, is critically important. In fact, this is a CB Insights poll that was based on 101 startup postmortems, meaning companies that failed, right? And the reasons that they failed was number one, because no market need. Number one, out of the gate, that's why they fail. If there's not a market need, you're headed in the wrong direction. And if you actually look down these, most of them have to do with something along the lines of customers or market need. Ran out of cash, to me, means you didn't have enough cash to figure out the market need, to figure out the customer requirement that's going to work. Not the right team. The team wasn't able to figure it out. Get out competed. You didn't understand the competition well enough. Pricing and cost issues. You didn't understand the market well enough. Poor product speaks for itself. Need or lack for business model. You didn't understand the market. So all of these elements have to do with understanding the market. And it's pretty interesting as you look at this, how this plays out for startups moving forward. So I'm actually an engineer by education, and so I started in the trenches of engineering in, looking at new products and developing new technologies. And engineering solves problems, and it does so with unique science and technology. But aligning that to a market and a customer is a very difficult part of the equation. But it takes us a similar mindset. And I'm going to assume that there's a lot of engineers or scientific folks on the call here. And so using those analytic skills in a way that understands how the customer is going to accept a product and what the needs are of that customer does so well with the engineering process of having a hypothesis, building something that you think is going to work, testing that hypothesis, and then repeating as necessary until you find something that works. So it's very, very iterative in nature and very discovery in nature. As I was an engineer and I was working in the trenches of engineering, I realized that I constantly was asking questions about the market. That was just the way I naturally thought, because I didn't want to build something that somebody didn't want. And so I was constantly asking these questions of, why are we building this? Who is going to buy this? Does anyone care? And it started getting me into this path of, okay, rather than developing and engineering a technology for a specific need, I wanted to develop and engineer and understand the specific need that the customers had. Because my theory was then you could go back and figure out what to build that would be successful. And I've seen this true time and time and time again. And so when I first started asking these questions, as I was working as an engineer and I was making a transition into being a product manager and actually writing the requirements for the engineers and determining what the market needed, I studied a lot and came across a lot of Steve Blank materials. And hopefully a lot of you have seen his work. And something that I like about his work, he talks a lot about lean startups. He talks a lot about being efficient in the process. He says that in the beginning, there's no answers inside the building. So get out the building, meaning talk to customers, truly understand their needs. And I like the way he defines a startup, and it's good to keep in mind for us, which is a startup is a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. And he, having had very many successes with startups in his past, was able to start to formulate this and say, a startup is not necessarily just a small company trying to act like a big company. It's a small company that is trying to figure out a product that works in a new market. And if you don't have that, then you're not venture capital ready. You're not going to reach a scalable entity and capability that you need to have to satisfy investors. And so having this in mind, to where you're constantly searching for where your technology specifically fits in the market, how you're going to compete in that market, is critically important. And as I think about this, maybe a lesser known name is Howard Moskowitz. Several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I got a phone call from a guy, and he said, "Hi, this is Howard Moskowitz. Do you know me?" And I said, "No, I don't know you." And it was really interesting. He's a short, round guy that has a lot of really interesting thoughts. He talks really fast. He talks very scientific. He's really charismatic in his approach to things. And he's a Harvard graduate, and he's known for reinventing spaghetti sauce. he started talking to me and he says, "Hey, I'm a big deal," and he doesn't mean that in a boasting sort of way. He just kind of states facts that way. But it was really interesting as I started to research him. I found a TED Talk by Malcolm Gladwell, and if you don't know him, he's one of the one of the biggest business thought leaders of our century, of the 21st century. And he did a TED Talk exclusively dedicated to Howard Moskowitz. And the whole story behind the TED Talk is that I think it was in the 80s, whenever he did this, quite a while ago, that it was Campbell Soup came to him and said, "We are getting beat by the competition. We need to figure out a spaghetti sauce that is going to be, nationwide, everybody loves. What's the perfect spaghetti sauce?" And so he basically told him that there is no perfect spaghetti sauce. There is only perfect spaghetti sauces. And he said, what we need to do is we need to go discover what type of sauce might be able to fit into the market in a way that you can be very profitable. And so what he did was he took a lot of different spaghetti sauces. He didn't know the right formula. He took a lot, he went across the country. He did a lot of research, did a lot of talking to people, and had mounds and mounds of data that he came back with. And what he found out was there was people that fell into one of 4 buckets of spaghetti sauces. And one of the 4 buckets was chunky spaghetti sauce. That he said 25% of America prefers chunky spaghetti sauce. And Campbell Soup said to him, "Wait, hold on. You're telling me 25% of America prefers chunky spaghetti sauce, and yet we are not creating any spaghetti sauce that is chunky at all?" And he said, yes. They went on to create a chunky spaghetti sauce that was profitable to the tune of $600 million within the next 10 years. And so I tell this story because people can't tell you what they need. They can't tell you what they want. You can't go ask them, "What do you want?" Right? You have to discover it. You have to get out there. You have to have some sort of something for them to react to. You have to understand what their needs are and what their job is to be done by hiring a product. And I will say that market validation, and this is what we call market validation. I apologize. And this process of understanding customers, this market validation, is the #1 contributing factor towards building a successful medtech company. There's several names in the business world that I look up to, and I've learned a lot from, in regards to how do we best approach this, how do we best understand the market, how do we best understand customers. And one of the biggest names is Clayton Christensen. And he's an author of, over a dozen books, I believe, and the #1 thought leader on innovation and how to develop innovation and how to bring these new technologies to new markets. And one of the concepts that he talks about that I really like and I believe is important to understand as you're developing a new technology and developing a new startup is this concept of jobs theory, which is that people hire a product to do a job. And in this Harvard Business Review article that he wrote, it says, when we buy a product, we essentially hire it to help us do a job. And if it does the job well, the next time we're confronted with the same job, we tend to hire that product again. And if it does a crummy job, we fire it and look for an alternative. And so the circumstances are more important than customer characteristics, product attributes, new technologies, or trends. And so the reason this is important is because as you understand how your product is going to be perceived in the market, as customers see and feel and read your value proposition, they are looking at in light of the job that they need that product to do. They are looking at in light of the job they need that product to do and other products that could accomplish that same job for them. And that is critically important to understand when you're working on customer discovery work, to understand the market and aligning a technology to the specific customers that need your product and need your technology. So this job theory is critically important. And in another Harvard Review article by Clayton Christensen, he's talking about marketing malpractice and how he believes that our marketing approach has been all wrong. And a lot of companies get this wrong. In fact, the Innovator's Dilemma is talking about why big companies fail, because they don't see and can't see the innovation that's coming up that's going to steal their market share. And in this article, it says to build brands that mean something to customers, you need to attach them to products that mean something to customers. And to do that, you need to segment markets in ways that reflect how customers actually live their lives. And I bring this up because it's critically important to understand segmentation of customers. This is where you get into the TAM, SAM, and SOM, which we actually call IM, where the total addressable market is everything that you could go into eventually if you're successful. Okay, great, that's big, let's understand that, let's put that number aside. Where the SAM then is the serviceable addressable market, where you say, okay, let's narrow that in to a general product concept that we could play within. What's the money being spent there today? But even more critically important is what we call IM, which is the immediately addressable market, which is understanding the narrow niche of customers that need exactly the value proposition that you are proposing to accomplish the job that they need that product to accomplish. And so understanding segmentation and narrowing in is critically important to raise funds, to develop the right technology, to be successful, and then you can expand from there. Clayton Christensen also talks about disruptive innovation in the terms of discovery marketing. So on one end of the equation, probably everybody in the world is familiar with downstream marketing, upstream marketing, even though they don't use those terms. They understand that, okay, we need to understand customers. Let's go to a focus group. Let's go watch them in action, right? Let's figure out how we can market our product to them even better. And let's figure out maybe some details of what we should build. And downstream marketing is actually, how do we sell that to these customers? What are the materials we're building? What's the language we're going to use? What's the channels we're going to use? But on the very, very front of this equation, probably where most of you are landing because you're interested in developing a life science startup, is what we call discovery marketing. And that discovery marketing is where you are going out and you aren't asking customers what do they need. You're discovering what they need. You're discovering that job they need a product to do. And you are discovering the options that they have to solve that problem, to get that job done for them today, and how you might be able to fit that better. And so maybe this is a decent place to pause to see if there's any questions from what I've said thus far. I've kind of been talking a lot here. Any thoughts or questions from the group out there at this point?
Hi, Aaron. Thanks for the presentation. This is Mohammed. So I have a question about, I like that slide that you were talking about the customers, and when they see your products fails, they go to find other products. So what if you have a product that you feel it matched the customer needs and it kind of outperformed the competition, but the problem that, for example, our technology is facing is that the competition has, I don't know, 10 or 20 years of product development, and it's much robust than our technology. And we are a little bit afraid that if right now, if we deliver our product to the customers, for example, even some simple things, user interface or this kind of stuff, kind of they feel like that, okay, that technology is more convenient to work with, and they just immediately go to use the other technology. What are your suggestions in that case?
Yeah, great question. So this is, similar to the spaghetti sauce scenario, right? There is a segment within your specific market that would elect to use your technology, and this is an assumption. I believe that there's a segment within your market that would elect to use your technology over the competitors for some reason. That reason, the competitors may be falling short in some element, right? So they might be satisfying 90% of the market who want this job done, right? But then 10% of the market is saying, if only I had this piece of the equation, if only I had better customer service, maybe if only I had this widget that occurred within the technology or this capability, I would probably do that first, that instead. And so my challenge for you there in that scenario is, don't look at how are we going to overtake the competitor right now. Look at what is an element of the market that they are underserving that we could serve best, and then grow from there to potentially compete with them in the future.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Otherwise, I'll keep going. Okay. So all of this, understanding the market, understanding the customer, this discovery marketing, is meant to build evidence. And it's meant to help you strategize in what you're going to develop, help you be able to tell a story and get others on board, because you get passionate about something. I do this myself, right? I've started several companies, some of which have failed and some of which have been wildly successful. You get passionate about that product, but being able to step outside of your passion and truly understand how you're going to have this technology be successful is where the rubber meets the road and where that evidence comes into play. I bring this slide up because funding will be necessary, and investors invest into either A, something they're passionate about, or B, something that is highly lucrative. And most of the market falls into category B. And the thing is, and especially in 2023, investors aren't looking for great companies. They're looking for exceptional companies, and they're looking to invest into companies that will radically improve their position to their LPs in returning funds back to their fund. And so understanding that nuance of when you come to an investor and you say, I have this great technology, I have this great company, we're going to make billions of dollars, they are looking at it from the lens of the customer and the market. Is that true? Once they get to market, is it true that they are going to be successful? And this is for early stage investments. Later stage investments are a lot less risky, where they've already commercialized. They've already said, we know our customer segment. We know our product that is working. We know how we're going to sell to them. And that's where the investments get less and less risky. But before you get to market, you are in a stage where you have to produce this evidence to be able to tell them that you have something that is going to win. And so if you remember Jerry Maguire's, you must show this evidence, show me the money, is what you need to be passionate, is what these investors are passionate about, and saying, show me how this is going to work. And so the evidence that you produce is for yourself and for the stakeholders about the fact that your technology has a customer segment, has a job that they want to hire it for, that nobody else can compete with or is doing well, and that means that you're going to be successful. The companies that get funded and are successful do this every single time. And so I want you to be aware of the fact that you may have a cognitive bias, and to step outside of that, you have to run your discovery market, your market validation, to truly understand the customer and the market, to develop the technologies that get there. And in order to accomplish that, we propose that there's 8 questions to ask to build this customer-centric strategy. And this process is something that I've developed over the last 20 years by looking at thought leaders like Steve Blank and Malcolm Gladwell and Clayton Christensen, and in practice with myself being in 20 years in medtech startups and in consulting with large companies and small companies to bring new technologies to market. And so I know this process works. And so let me walk through these 8 questions. And so the first is, what is my customer's job to be done? What are their circumstances? What are their needs? And that is what we need to start this process with, is truly understanding that. And it's iterative in nature. And so we'll constantly be coming back to that. And number 2 is, what other options do these customers have to hire to solve their problem? And this is the competitive landscape. And we're looking at anything and everything we can that falls within the bucket of the market that we think we fit into. A quick example is, we were working with a client at one point about this great technology for the dermatology space, and the number 1 competitor to that technology was the patient choosing to do nothing. Yeah, and so understanding the nuances of them choosing to do nothing, which solved their problem better than actually a wildly expensive technology, was part of this equation. And so understanding all of the competitive landscape is from the decisions that the customer, or the choices the customer have, is important. Number 3, who's paying for this? How much? What is it worth? So this is the reimbursement side of the equation, which is critically important for us in the life sciences space and medical technologies. Understanding who is paying for it, the job they need this technology to do, the dollars that are circling around getting that job done today is critically important. And so the reimbursement side of the equation comes into play pretty quickly. A quick example of that is that we were working with a technology that was going to be pretty expensive, and to bring it to market. And the existing landscape of reimbursement had a very specific dollar amount to it. And so to be able to bring a new technology to market that was wildly more expensive was going to be nearly cost prohibitive, because for the lower price to accomplish the job, they would nearly choose that every single time. And so what we ended up doing was redirecting that technology to be able to accomplish more things, to be able to get more reimbursement, to be able to be more successful in the market. Number 4, how much is being spent on the problem today? So this is calculating your TAM, your SAM, and understanding, how much dollars are exchanging hands out there today. And the other element of this is the segmentation that becomes critically important as you do more customer discovery work. So all of that is really secondary research with a little bit of primary research. But then you have to get into the customer discovery element, which is the qualitative research. That's going out and talking to customers. And now you have language to work, you have a lot of hypothesis to work within on what you think is going to be successful. You have gaps that you need filled by talking to those customers, and you get out there and you talk to them, and I guarantee you, your eyes will open up even further. Every single time we run customer discovery for a client, we find something new that redirects their technology, redirects their segmentation, that makes them wildly more successful. And so I believe that it is critically important. The next part of this equation is, what quantitative evidence do I have? And so again, you might have something qualitative where you're presenting back to your investors, here's what the customers have said, right? Here's what the customer's needs are. But going out and getting that quantitative evidence to say, something along the lines of 90% of physicians would stop using their current product and choose our technology instead, goes a long ways with getting investors on board, with getting other stakeholders on board to help your cause, which you need to be successful. And so that quantitative evidence helps you understand your customers further from a quantitative perspective, and helps you test your value proposition that you think is going to be accurate. If it comes back and it's not very successful, then you have to, run through this process some more. Go talk to more people, go try something else, find a new hypothesis, ask new questions, develop a new value proposition, and then test it again. And that process, having the funds and time to go through that process to get to something that is going to meet the mark from a customer and market perspective, that takes time, takes effort, takes money, takes truly understanding how all this process works. Number 7, given a set of unbiased assumptions, what could the market potentially actually be? And this is what I'm going to call your SOM, or what we call IAM, which is that immediately addressable market. So understanding the quantitative element of how people are going to respond to your value proposition, understanding the qualitative element of how the needs that they have that has allowed you to develop this value proposition, and the reimbursement and the paying elements of the equation, you can then start to build what the potential specific market opportunity for you is, what that serviceable, obtainable market is for you and your technology and your company. It's not good enough to say it's $1 billion market. What you need to say is it's $1 billion market with $800 million being spent in our specific technology subset, with $100 million opportunity for the specific niche customers that want the value proposition that doesn't exist today that our technology is offering. You can build models from that are going to be wildly more accurate than anybody else that is competing for investment dollars with you. And then number 8 is the strategy of how do I get there? And largely that's experience, team. This is where your team comes into play, that have had experience, that have brought new technologies to market, that have those black eyes and those have been in the mud before in bringing these technologies to market. And so they can help you navigate how to then strategize, given all this information that you know about the market, the customer, the positioning that you've chosen, how that's going to be successful. Then you can start to execute on that. And I will say that eventually you can get there. But it does take time, and it is an iterative process, and you're constantly changing a word here, a feature there, a technology value proposition statement here, to be able to more adequately and efficiently meet the needs of your customers. Going through this is an entire process. And a couple of years ago, we were asked by a local college, university, to develop this into a book. And so this is the Market Validation Essentials book. And I placed the QR code up there where you can download a copy of it if you want to snap it really quick. It walks through this entire process of getting to customers, nuances of details of how you can accomplish that, how to read into the needs that they're talking about, qualitative, quantitative measures, and several other things. And so feel free to jump on there and download a copy of that if you're interested. And maybe Emily can make that available somewhere else as well. One of the things that I want to draw your attention to that is in that book is this idea of a fundability criteria matrix. And similar to the market needs that you are going to be working through, it walks through you as a company. Are you ready for funding? Have you built the evidence you need to raise funds? And so I wanted to walk through those really quickly. The first is team, and these are all built on a 0 to 3 scale, and they get multiplied at the end to have a total score. And so you can understand that, excuse me, if any of these elements are zero, the entire thing goes to zero, and which shows you what to focus on, and the fact that you have a lot of work to do, before you start moving towards funding. But the first is team. The second is customer validation. And so that is having the qualitative and the quantitative evidence that the customer is aligned to what you think they want. The third is reimbursement. And so as you can see, this largely follows those 8 questions in that process that I just walked you through. The fourth is market size. The fifth is the competition and the landscape and who you're going to be competing with. The sixth is clinical feasibility. And so this one is largely how well do you fit into the clinical equation? Is that actually going to work? And the sixth, 1, 2, 3, 4, seventh, excuse me, is technical feasibility. How likely will the technology that you propose going to work, and the evidence that you have around that. The 8th is your IP position. The 9th is regulatory, and how you're going to bring your product to market and the regulations that surround it. And so those are the 9 key criteria that we look at, that investors look at, and that's a way to start to look at, are you ready for funding, and how to narrow in on the evidence you need to develop further. So with that, I think that's about all I have. The last thing I'll just say is get out there, get outside the office, talk to your customers, understand the nuances of the decisions they're going to make when buying your product or electing to buy somebody else's product. Narrow in on your hypothesis on where you think a value proposition is going to fit. And that is the #1 thing that would determine the success of your technology or your company moving forward. And so with that, I'll open it up to additional questions or comments from the group.
Anyone has questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, or you pop it in the chat box. It's an open Q&A session.
Hi, Erin. Thanks so much for this presentation. My name is Bao Qing. I'm from one of the startups actually at ULP. I have a question about kind of targeting a somewhat niche market. That's kind of the space that we're in right now. And I also have a feeling we're kind of competing against some of the more well-established companies with more capital, more resources. I'm kind of curious if you have any insights on how we would go about marketing to our clients who are not necessarily in the broader consumer market yet, and the customer base itself is somewhat niche at the moment. So if you have any insights on how to do that and how to kind of make ourselves more competitive to compared to the companies who are already out there. Thank you.
Yeah. So not knowing your market specifically, there's a lot of different nuances of different markets and strategy around that. But I'll go back to this concept where you say you're in a niche market, right? And so you need to have a highly competitive advantage, a differentiation in your competitive advantage compared to the other options that they have. And so that needs to be, and I use the term wildly because it needs to be enough to get them to change. In life science in particular, when we're talking about physicians, hospitals, patients, getting them to switch to something is a Herculean effort sometimes. And so you have to truly understand what they want, what the value of that is, and how to find that specific group of people. And so, when you're in a niche market, being able to speak that language and be wildly differentiated and be able to find where they exist and how to get to those types of people is what you have to be able to do. Again, not knowing exactly the market nuances, there's a lot more strategy behind it, but that's the overall theory of how I would approach that.
Thank you. And if I can ask a follow-up question here, we believe that we do have a competitive technology here, and we kind of have an idea. We actually do have an idea of where to start with the customer base. I guess my question is that, if it's not a market that's like, selling pop, for example, or soda to people, it's more, let's say, different institutions across, the nation or the world. What would you say would be a good strategy there? Is it more through word of mouth, direct contact? What sorts of actual action do we want to put out there as a marketing strategy?
Yeah, so I'm not the guy to answer that question, to be honest. I don't do downstream marketing, actually. But generally speaking, you have to find out where those customers live, right? Where they're actually in the mindset of trying to solve their own problem, trying to hire a product to do a job, and then interject yourself into them from that position. And so I don't know within your market whether that word of mouth is never a strategy, but having whether social media is, or whether clinical papers is, or whether partnerships is, I don't know the answer to that. But what I know is you need to find out where those niche customers are, where they reside, where they're trying to make the decision of a job that they need to hire a product for, and then interject yourself into that equation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? You guys are making this easy on me.
Hello, Aaron. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing excellent. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for the great presentation.
Oh,
I had
thank
a
you.
quick question. What are areas of investments that like VCs are looking to invest in as far as what type of projects?
Oh man. Yeah. So let me think. How can I best answer this? Well, number one, investors have a very specific thesis that they're investing into, right? And they're all different. And so I can't speak for, I mean, I can speak in terms of trends where, the last couple of years, digital health, for instance, has seen a drastic increase in investments, and is something that investors are really excited about, right? And so on one front, that's definitely true. But I think the most important thing to understand is that investors do have an investment thesis. Investors are looking for something very specific. And so understanding what that is, what they need to accomplish, and then being able to bring your investment opportunity to the right people is almost more important than trying to guess what the overall trend is. And hopefully I'm not skirting the question, but to answer your question, maybe a little more specifically, digital health has been wildly successful over the last couple of years. The consumerization of healthcare is really on the minds of investors these days. The insurance side of the equation, med device, is kind of shrinking a little bit, but in terms of robotics and some of those, that seems to have a lot of interest. A lot of companies are raising funds in that space. And I can't speak well to pharma or biotech, but the personalization of medicine, generally speaking, I see a lot of interest in as well. So Hopefully I answered your question. And,
Yes,
okay,
yeah, you did. You did. This is great. Yeah, I mean, this is perfect. And I completely understand the right project has to match with the right investor, so it makes sense to them. And first, find a great project and then match it to the right investor with the proper pitch deck and the presentation and the company to back it up. Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. And I'll add too, I was at an event a couple of weeks ago by a venture capital firm. And we were talking about 2023. Investors' mindsets are changing a little bit. They changed in 2022, and we're seeing the results of that in 2023. And we believe it's going to continue on for a long time. And that is over the last decade, 10, 15, 20 years or so, we've had this, luxury of money being cheap, largely cheap, right? And investors had that luxury as well. Their LPs had that luxury as well. And so the investment mentality was largely one of, dare I say, FOMO, which fear of missing out, right? And so they piled on investments. They cared less about, this idea that I'm going to back one for a long time, and more about let's back 10, 12, 30 of them. And one of them hits, we're still okay. And so what we're seeing in 2023 is everyone is narrowing in their investments. They're picking not 5 great companies. They're picking one exceptional company and saying, I'm doubling, tripling down on this one. And I know that the company that has more money, that can stay longer, is eventually going to figure out the right market, eventually going to have their technology hit right. And that's a large investor sentiment that we're seeing changing in 2023. Again, I believe it's going to last a lot longer than 18 months or so, that some other investors are talking about. But that is something to truly understand as you're raising funds in 2023.